We have a bidirectional audio streaming API that was recently announced, this low latency, real-time streaming of the audio. So rather than having to go taking audio, convert it to text, work on that, and then changing it back to speech, the audio is actually able to be streamed back and forth. And it's just kind of crazy when you think about the things that are going to be possible and are possible and we're seeing people do.
Welcome to Always On CXCX, the show for contact center and IT leaders. Between helping support your contact center reps, your customers, and the tech that makes the contact center function, you're relied upon quite a lot. You can't afford for your customer experience, employee experience, or stability of the contact center to falter. If you're ready to find the next strategy to keep your customer employee experience always on, let's get into this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Always On CXEX. Today, we have Sean Keegan, Azure Communication Services developer and evangelist from Microsoft.
It's funny.
Oh my gosh, I know. You said you were going to make a joke about how long your title is, and here I am.
Yeah.
But no, we are chatting about all things ACS, digging into their call automations, Teams Phone, AI, everything related to what's going on in Azure Communication Services. But let's jump into the conversation. Sean, welcome to the show.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Josh. Excited to be here.
Let's start with some of the basics. What is Azure Communication Services and how does that fit into the broader Microsoft ecosystem, especially when it comes to powering contact centers, Teams Phone, and customer experience?
So Azure Communication Services, it's Microsoft's AI-ready communication platform. So it allows developers to integrate different communication methods. So voice, video, chat, SMS, and telephony, which we'll probably talk quite a bit about in this call, into your applications. So it's actually built on the same infrastructure that powers Microsoft Teams. And what we've done is essentially white labeled the services that are available in Teams and made them available as APIs. So that's at its core, what the Azure Communication Services part of that is just like the different communication methods that you put in apps. And what's nice is that, it's part of the Azure ecosystem, meaning, you can easily seamlessly integrate with the various other applications or parts of the Azure network. So, whether that's Azure AI or OpenAI, Teams Phone, which we'll talk about, Dynamics 365. And that's where it kind of gets really nice and easy for modern contact centers and the customer engagement platforms.
How long has Azure Communication Services been around? Do you know?
That's a good question. Yeah, and one where the answer is a little bit more, I think, convoluted than you would expect, right? I can't give like a specific time frame because it started, and this I would have to fact check myself, but I think it started kind of like as Skype, and then as the capabilities went just beyond just chat or just video, and we're like, this is a whole kind of communication platform now. It kind of became its own thing. And I don't actually remember the exact timeline of when that came into effect, but it's definitely been around for a few years, and it's in like this iteration of Azure Communication Services.
One thing we've talked about quite a bit on this show is like, if you're going to bank on any one company, it's good to bank on Microsoft and what's going on there. So no matter if it's been around for a really long time, or, you have stuff like Microsoft Teams that really took off in the last probably handful of years, like it's something that's worth trusting in. They have the budget, they have, smart people like yourself that are at the company that, us third party people can very much trust in. So we appreciate you.
Build on top of, just some cool stuff. Awesome. Yeah, I love to hear it.
All right. So part of Azure Communication Services is the Azure call automation. It's one of the more exciting capabilities that we're seeing emerge. What does that actually allow developers and organizations to do? And how are you seeing it being used in production right now?
So just to kind of like give a brief introduction as to what, call automation is. So that's our server-side SDK. It gives developers the ability to kind of control voice calls programmatically. When I was learning about, what all this was, I was very new to like the communication world. So I didn't know the difference between call automation, calling. I was like, that seems like the same thing, right? But yeah, I like to think about call automation almost as like the brain behind the call. It's like, what happens? Somebody calls in, how should the system respond? What actions should happen based on the user input? So it's kind of like that orchestration. And you think about, IVRs, you call a customer support and it's like, press 1 for an agent, press 2. Well, never says that. It's like, press 1 for this, press 2 for, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. So it's that ability to do that kind of stuff. It's like very event driven. You can answer, reject calls. collect keypad input. So those are the kind of functionalities. And you've seen these things. People, anybody that's called a customer support line, right, has had these kind of interactions. You've been put on hold. Those are the kind of things that, kind of like the table stakes for, the call automation SDK. So that's what we see in production. We see, contact center setting up that kind of flow and having all that handled programmatically.
Mhm.
And I think like an example, let's say you're a healthcare provider, you're a healthcare facility, somebody calls in and you have whatever 50 different specialists. Rather than have somebody like trying to like a human answer that call and figure out like, okay, who's the right person to get them to and go through this whole like, I don't want to say wasting time, but if it's something that can be handled programmatically, like that's the kind of thing that the call automation SDK can do, is like figure out who the right contact is and then route the call to the correct person rather than having like a human have to do that. So that kind of programmatic orchestration is possible, and you can layer AI on top of that and have it almost be like smart routing and understand like the sentiment of what the user is asking, and then have that routed to the right healthcare person kind of thing.
Do you see maybe certain use cases or certain industries that use the call automation more than others, or is it kind of just broad? Anyone can use it.
I think it's pretty broad. Yeah. I mean, I've seen definitely, like healthcare and banking, government agencies can use it. Pretty much most places are going to have some sort of contact where you can call in and try to get a human. And so really like anybody can use this kind of functionality in their contact center, I think.
How difficult is it to set up something like the call automation? Is it something that can be done in the matter of minutes, or is it more like a couple weeks, couple months?
The idea is that it's meant to be pretty lightweight, right? Like getting up and running, we have pretty good documentation and quick starts available. So I think implementing the kind of the basics and the bare bones, like you should be able to get up and running with a prototype fairly quickly. But if you want to start implementing, like I said, some of that, AI logic that will route based on certain things, you can make it as complex as you want. But yeah, it's kind of like choose your own adventure a little bit.
If you want it to be pretty lightweight, you want it to just route calls, that could be a lot easier. But if you want to start integrating some more of the AI capabilities and things of that nature, it's going to take a little bit longer. And it depends the skill set of the person who's implementing it as well, whether they've done it before. So, all right. So another part of that, and one thing we've talked about on the show too, is like we have the call automation and then we have the calling SDK. It's opened up some serious possibilities, especially from custom voice apps and intelligent call control. Some things we talked about a little bit just now, but maybe we can dive into it a little bit deeper. What's the most interesting use case that you've seen being built so far with these?
The calling SDK is very interesting to me too. This is kind of in general going to be more of that like front end user interface that the client sees, right? So the client side part of things where it's like, this is what's embedded where people can have that voice and video capabilities in their apps. But yeah, I mean, with this, right, comes the ability to do all sorts of cool things. And I think we're only just starting to scratch the surface of cool use cases. And every day, every week, we're hearing pretty novel things happen. So I think what's pretty cool is folks giving voice agent tools and making the agents that they use with voice kind of more powerful, more knowledgeable, having more context. Right. So I think kind of a basic example somebody told me about recently that I thought was neat was if you imagine like a mechanic, he's working in his shop and he's working on a car and like finds a faulty part. The old flow would be, you'd have to stop, go look up the part, like go see what's going on, see if there's like replacements around. I mean, you have to like stop his own like workflow. Now, let's say you built a voice agent and you gave it tools via some protocol, whether it's, MCP, the model context protocol or something else. Now, like he doesn't have to stop working and can just ask, whatever the voice agent is, hey, like this is the part, what's going on? Find me a replacement. And as long as it's set up, right, and has the tools, like you've now built this, assistant, this agent that's going to help. You can go call nearby shops, see if anybody has a replacement part, maybe place the order right there and handle that workflow right there for them. That's like something we're seeing in practice, right? Is these like voice agents, this ability to like make these calls and have this stuff happen. I think another example somebody shared with me, this is, less useful in like a work setting, but it's kind of like for inspiration. If you were to give a multimodal tools to your voice agent, right? And so, you have another agent, and in this case, you say like, hey, make me a recipe for a drink. And it's connected to a camera, and the camera can take a picture or a video of your cabinet and see what you have available. It can make a suggestion based on what it sees. And so now, like, you're implementing multiple modalities. You have your voice happening, right, where you're talking to this agent. It's able to implement a camera feed, make a decision based on that. And so then it's like doing its thing to find and create a recipe for you. So this ability to amplify the power of what you can do with your voice, it's very, very cool. There's just a lot going on. And this is kind of like a silly example, right? It's like make me a cocktail. But I think the idea there's, you can be inspired to do, I don't know, we'll say more productive things, as you increase like the modalities and like the context that the agents have access to.
What about from like a contact center space? And I know I asked a question related to like how to set up the call automation. And I know that's a little bit more behind the scenes, but what is it like using the SDK, maybe from a vendor side of things of, hey, I want to go in, I want to create an app using Azure calling. Where would they go? How would they set that up? What does that look like?
Probably the best place to start is the Azure Communication Learn documentation. It's going to have information really just on kind of like we talked about before, just like the very basic getting started. What are the features and functionalities and use cases, and right through like how do you build a fully customized calling experience. And so, whether you want to make or receive like VoIP or PSTN calls, how to embed that into your apps, that's where you're going to get that information on how to start. One thing I think that's really cool about the calling SDK is you're going to have the ability to, like I said, make or receive VoIP calls or PSTN calls, join group calls, screen share, the things you would expect in a video app, right? Like we're all unfortunately very used to video calls these days. So like that functionality is going to definitely be there. But what's really neat, and I think this is where some of the powerful opportunities come in, is that you can access the raw media streams from this SDK. And what does that look like, right? Like that's going to open up a lot of possibilities. So you can feed the audio stream right into Azure Cognitive Services. And what's that going to do? That's going to allow you to transcribe it in real time, analyze sentiment, translate the conversation on the fly. So if you're a contact center and you want a global presence, this is going to open that up, right? You don't need to have necessarily people all over the world if you can have translation that's happening immediately. That's going to be more advanced, right? If you're going to want to access the raw media streams and do some sort of like analysis on that. But the capability is there and you have access to it. We're building more and more demos that kind of showcase some of these cool features, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of that example that you gave, I don't remember what I was watching the other day, but there was a commercial and it was for Copilot. And this commercial was a woman is sitting at her desk, she's on her computer, she's clearly working, and someone from, I think, South Korea is giving an update on how things are going in the business. And she's speaking in Korean. And as part of the video, it spans over to the woman who's sitting at her computer, and there's kind of like this text that gets written on her face and flows into her ear. And it goes from being in Korean to being in English and flowing into her ear. And it's just like, I haven't been on a call or anything yet where there's live translation, but that is just, it's just astonishing to me that is something that is possible. Back in the days, you did that was not a possibility in any way. Come a long way.
And it's crazy, Josh, because not only is it possible, right? It's here, right? Like people are doing it and we're hearing stories of this happening. We have a bidirectional audio streaming API that was recently, or SDK that was recently announced and demoed at Build and Ignite. And so that allows for even more possibilities, this low latency, real-time streaming of the audio. So rather than having to go taking audio, convert it to text, do whatever kind of analyzing or work on that, and then changing it back to speech, right? Like now, like the audio is actually able to be streamed back and forth, and it's just kind of crazy when you think about the things that are going to be possible and are possible, and we're seeing people do.
I mean, that could be so beneficial, especially in the contact center space of being able to, receive a call for a native Spanish speaker and for the agent to only be speaking English and for them to have that conversation and being able to solve the problem. I mean, can you imagine how much faster that is and time saving of just being able to have that real time translation and be able to communicate back and forth like that? It's amazing.
It honestly is like kind of mind blowing to think about. Yeah. But we can
it is.
just talk about it.
we could just sit here and just be wowed all day by that, but we'll
By
move
just
on to the next
technology in
thing.
general. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So a lot of our audience uses Microsoft Teams Phone. And what's possible now, Microsoft Teams Phone extensibility is pretty amazing. But how do you see ACS enhancing that?
So it's a great question. I know AudioCodes is one of our early partners, in Azure Communication Services, Teams Phone extensibility. Talk about another mouthful. That's one there. So I'll just caveat quickly for you and the audience that ends up listening. Not my area of expertise. I'm familiar with what we're doing at a high level. So, and I think you've had a guest on recently that was able to do more of a deep dive on this,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, cool. So I'll say, if folks are listening and, they want more info and go deeper on what I can say, like, feel free to check out the other episode, but, happy to kind of give an overview of what I do know. But yeah, so,
Is Teams Phone extensibility for any third party app, or is that only for contact centers?
good question. I don't want to misspeak. I believe anybody could use it. I think the main use case that I think of, right, and like that I've been kind of, I'd say, taught about like what Teams Phone extensibility is, kind of fits in that kind of exact scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine that it is, applicable to other situations. But I don't want to, misspeak on this one. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it at, I know that it does work for contact centers.
I believe in our episode with Tom Arbuthnot, episode 21, he does dive into that a little bit more as well. So if you are listening and you want to dive really, really deep into Microsoft Teams contact centers and the Unify integration model specifically, tune into that episode after this one with Sean.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Tom for going on and being knowledgeable on that one.
Yeah, he's really knowledgeable in the space. He's a great guy to follow, also just enjoyable to speak with too. So how does Teams Phone accessibility open up the ability to use Azure AI for developers as well? Any thoughts on that?
So I think just in general, the fact that this word extensible is in there, I think that to me that word does a lot of heavy lifting in that you get the access to the various things that we talked about before, like with the call automation and with the calling SDKs, right? You're not limited to one specific set of things. Like you're able to do these customizable, programmable calling workflows. So you can use call automation to handle the logic, whether it's the routing or the IVRs, and then you can hand off that call to a Teams Phone endpoint. Use the calling SDK to let agents make and receive calls, from a custom UI that's still backed by the Teams infrastructure, right? So you don't lose, any of the compliance or security benefits that you have for Microsoft 365, right? You're not trading any of that safety for flexibility, which I think, was kind of the case beforehand if you were stuck using kind of like that old system. I'm not just talking about with Azure Communication Services, but like just that paradigm of, having two disparate systems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on the show, a lot we talk about the importance of Azure Communication Services, especially in the design of a contact center, because what it does is it brings Microsoft Teams Phone into the contact center and the reliability that comes with Microsoft Teams Phone, the 5.9 uptime. And every time we have conversations with customers, and anytime we're doing surveys and we see like what do customers and contact center leaders care about the most, it's AI is cool. It's a nice to have. It's kind of still a bells and whistles piece, like feature add in, but it's the reliability that matters the most. And you have that with Azure Communication Services for sure.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Josh. Yeah, right. You get that enterprise grade, like telephony infrastructure, but you also now get this freedom to build, your own experience.
So speaking of reliability, voice is back in the spotlight, especially when it's paired with AI. How are organizations combining Azure Communication Services with tools like Azure Cognitive Services and OpenAI to create a better voice experience?
Voice is, this is kind of where things get, really exciting. We're seeing a shift from just enabling voice and communication to making it intelligent. So with Azure Communication Services, we can plug into Azure Cognitive Services, and you can do things like real-time transcription, translation, which we've talked a little bit about already, that sentiment analysis. So that stuff is super powerful. When you bring OpenAI into the mix too, right, you really start unlocking, like a whole new level of whether it's customer support, just your own analysis as a team. What I like to think about, a scenario that we've seen is, a voice bot now that's not just following a script, right? We've seen that and we've experienced that, but now the script can or the bot can understand the conversation, right? So it can summarize what's been said, detect the caller's intent. It can even pick up on emotional cues depending on, how it's built, whether it's, user frustration or user satisfaction,
Mm.
and then use that and respond accordingly, right? So, hand it off to a human, give the human the full summary, let hey, this person's not thrilled, right? But yeah, you don't get stuck. Like the agent, it's not stuck saying like, can you repeat that, or what's the issue, right? Like
Mhm.
they're up to speed. Like you're able to have this voice agent really become, an intelligent coworker.
How are companies getting the data behind that as far as like the large language model? Do they have their own large language model that they're uploading and that's becomes the basis, or is that something that coincides with Azure? How does that work?
This is another one of those situations where, like, it depends what folks want to do. Like, you can certainly, like, if you wanted to have a customized kind of like knowledge base, right? You can
Mhm.
feed it your own data so that it's working off of that, right? You have like your user manual and you have a customer support bot or agent, you know, give it the information it needs to be as helpful as you want it to be, right? So you can feed it your own LLM and have it respond and work off of that. You can also leverage, the various existing things that are out there, whether it's, something with Azure or another LLM. So, again, I hate to feel like I'm punting, but yeah, it really depends. But that's something we see people do is just upload like your own user manual, right? And like say, stick to this script. Like this is where, don't make anything up, answer questions based on the information in here. And so we're seeing, a lot of that.
Yeah. So maybe a good place to start could be something like a knowledge base or an FAQ section from a website.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. We're even seeing, in our docs, some best practices include, not just having the text that are in the docs, but having, I forget the exact name of the file, but like llm.txt, right? So that when an
Mhm.
LLM goes and looks at your docs or looks at your page, like that's where it's getting its first pass of like knowledge on the website. And I think as we continue building tools, knowing that intelligent agents are going to be consuming them, building with that in mind, and you can do that with your own docs. Like this isn't necessarily voice related, right? But this is like, think about the agents that are going to be consuming your public entities. Like at some point, like agents are going to be, I don't know if it's going to be more than human consumption, but like at the very least, that's like that usage is only going up and up, right? So like
Yeah.
let's make it accessible for them so that the agents can be as useful as we want them to be.
Now that you're sharing that, I had a use case that came to mind, one that was told to me from one of our customers at the University of Central Florida. They created their own, basically their own bot where they uploaded all of the user manuals for how to use the contact center that we have here at AudioCodes. That way, whenever an agent goes in, they can have a conversation with the bot and learn how to use the product in the best possible way. So if they have any questions about how to use a specific feature, they can just have a conversation with the bot and it's pulling directly from the main source material, which we found to be a pretty interesting use case. So it's a use case that's kind of behind the scenes rather than right in front with customers, because sometimes, if you're rolling things out with customers, there's a little bit more risk there than there is kind of
Yeah, yeah,
going behind the scenes. A little
yeah.
safer.
That's neat. I love that.
Mhm.
And it's also like it's probably something like that. It's super useful too because you can you have these like specialized agents, right? Like no one
Mhm.
person is going to be able to know the same level of depth on all of those things, right? But
Yeah.
if you have an agent or whatever, say it's 100 agents, each one knows each use case, right? Like, yeah, that's kind of fascinating. I like that.
Love it. Well, Sean,
Totally.
thank you so much for coming on. It was a wonderful conversation. We always love having people from Microsoft on the show to kind of give us a little bit behind the scenes of what's going on there, especially us who are kind of living and breathing the Microsoft Teams and Contact Center and a lot of the AI and everything that's going on with Azure Communication Services. So thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Like, really love the show. And yeah, let's do it again.
Awesome. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, all.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Always on CXCX. If you learned one thing from this episode, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're using Microsoft Teams and are looking to integrate a contact center, consider trying Voca for free for 30 days. Voca is built on Microsoft Azure, meaning your customer interactions start, stay, and end with the same reliability and 5.9 uptime as Microsoft Teams. Just Google AudioCodes Voca or find the link in the show notes. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of Always on CXCX. We'll see you in the next one.